repeat visitors, I'm not Esther. Obviously, I'm Young Mi Park. I'm one of the board members at the AMA New York, and I'm filling in for Esther today. So please excuse any mistakes that I made because I don't usually host these sessions, but I'm really delighted to be here because I've known Michael F. Shine for a few years now, and I've been very impressed with the body of knowledge that he's put together. He's extremely well read. And when I first met him, he explained that he had noticed certain patterns in history about people who came to power and how they came to power. And consistently, they use these really interesting strategies that he named hype strategies. So he developed a body of work around this because they're very effective strategies for persuasion, for leadership, etc. And he's going to share a lot of his knowledge today about how to use these strategies for ethical purposes, to gain advantage no matter what's going on with the economy, and how to beat the competition. So very much looking forward to him. And also January 12th, his book on hype strategies to help you survive an economic, that's not the name of the book, Michael, is it? Your mic is off.
No, it's called The Hype Handbook.
The Hype Handbook is coming out on January 1st by
January 12th, I'm sorry.
January
No,
12th, sorry,
Yeah.
from McGraw-Hill. So you're just going to get a little hors d'oeuvre today and then come back to buy the book in January. So, but before we get started with Michael, I'd like to put in a word for the AMA. If you're not already a member, we'd like to invite you to become a member. If you've enjoyed our programs, they're going to be even more next year because we're expanding and moving into different areas. So please go to amanewyork.org/join and join us. Upcoming programs in January, actually in December, our next program is Cocktails in the Green Room. So not only will we enjoy some cocktails as a group, but we'll also go into small group breakout rooms to get to know each other a little bit better. And there are going to be trivia and other games. So please join us on December 10th. January 12th, there's going to be a workshop on email marketing strategies. And on January 14th, another Young Women at Work workshop for navigating stressful conversations. I'm sure everybody has had those kind of toxic situations in the workforce. So please don't miss that. And don't forget, if you're not an AMA New York member, please join us now. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Michael. So Michael, take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. I've been a big admirer of the AMA for a really long time. And so I will kind of talk to you about this concept for about 40 minutes, and then I'd love to, answer any questions that you might have. So first of all, I'm a little surprised, actually, that so many respectable AMA members have come to a seminar about this thing that we're calling hype. I find that very exciting because traditionally the word hype has been considered a negative word, right? It means taking something that doesn't really have much meat around it and talking it up and blowing a lot of smoke. And, at its worst, it can be kind of synonymous with conning people or really playing people. And I chose the word, however, instead of marketing or self-promotion for a number of reasons, but one of them is because, excuse me, there's one community that has always considered hype to be a very positive thing. And it's the hip hop world, the world of hip hop. So for those of you who are fans of hip hop, some of you may be, some of you may not be, people who created hip hop are quite literally from the poorest neighborhood in the United States of America, the South Bronx, right? And they were so poor that they didn't even have instruments. They had to use record players, basically, which we now fancily call turntables, but they were just record players. And it is now some of the wealthiest people in entertainment are in the world of rap. And in the rap community, there's always been this member of a rap group, especially in the past, called the hype man, and the hype man was always a positive thing. The hype man was responsible for a couple of things. The hype man, yeah, got the crowd worked up, got the energy going, got the emotion going, promoted the show beforehand. But the hype man also rapped. So there was no distinction between the promotion and the art and the thing itself, right? And the business. So it occurred to me that in this very crazy time that we're living in, you know, I don't want to compare us to people from the South Bronx, unless you happen to be in the South Bronx, but that was a very dire situation. However, we're all sort of marginalized right now. If you look at the people who have been what I call hype artists, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. They've always been people who have not had direct access to power, people who are on the outskirts, right? I mean, if you have direct access to power, if you come from an established family, if you went to the right school, you might have an advertising budget for your company. You might have the right connections right off the bat. You might, just be able to do the three P's of product and promotion and price, right? But if you don't have access to the traditional sort of, you know, assets or resources, you need to come up with creative ways of doing something. So the way I define hype is very simple. All it means is getting a large group of people emotional enough to take an action that benefits you, that you want them to take. And that can be a really evil action. That can be a really good action, or it can just be an action. So who are some of the people who do this really well? Music managers in the old days before it became a legitimate business were one. Some really nasty people like cult leaders and propaganda artists, but also people like Richard Branson and Martin Luther King. And it is true that a lot of times people we consider bad people come to this more easily, but that's not because these strategies are inherently bad. They're amoral. They're neither moral or immoral. It's just that people like that see the world the way it really is. They kind of see the world as a chessboard, whereas the rest of us have a lot of hangups. It's it doesn't feel right. I don't know about this. Our emotions get in the way. So my goal in the short amount of time we have is to convince you that there's some really good material in here that you can apply ethically to your own stuff, because the bad guys already have it. Like, we don't need to teach them anything, right? But the good guys and the good ladies don't, and we need to put it in your hands. But we have a crisis on our hands. A lot of us are suffering right now. We can't meet in person, we can't go to conferences, we can't do what we traditionally do to sell. So we need some really effective strategies to adapt to that. And so, even though, as young me mentioned, I have a book coming out in January, and that has 12 hype strategies. I've basically found that all of these people, you can boil all of these mass psychology practices and mass promotion practices into 12 strategies. I've decided I'm going to talk about 3 that are specifically applicable to the subject of this talk, right? Which is dealing, adapting in tough economic times and adapting in a crisis. So, and I'd love you to come away. I'll tell you some stories, because the best way to teach is through stories. But I'd also love you to come up away with some hard and fast tactics that you can use, the minute you get off this line. So one of the 3 strategies, the 3 of 12 that I'm going to talk to you about right now, is a strategy I call make war, not love. So, in addition to writing this book and giving AMA talks, the way I make my living is I own a marketing agency. And I never wanted to own a business, but it was an opportunity that sort of evolved and presented itself based on something that happened to me. So I have left a corporate job, excuse me, to become a freelance writer. I had always wanted to be a writer, and I saw an opportunity in what I thought was copywriting, but was really, to be more specific, demand generation writing, writing white papers and web copy and content and things like that for a very specific niche. And I figured that because I was a good writer, and I had always been told that people would just flock to me and buy my writing. And so I had like a year's worth of income saved up. And I just went out there, and I was sure I had the numbers worked out in my head. And I almost lost all my money. I mean, I burned through all my savings. I got a few clients, but I just couldn't make it happen. And so I started to get very nervous. And so I kind of talked my way into a column for Inc. magazine, the digital version. And I kept seeing, does anyone here know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? You probably do if you're in marketing, but raise your hand if you know who Gary V is. Yeah. Okay. So most of you. See, that's the beauty of the modern world of micro fame, how we're no longer famous. If you ask my mom who Gary Vaynerchuk was, she would have no idea, right? But everyone on this call does. So anyway, I kept seeing this gentleman who I respect a lot for a lot of reasons. However, I kept seeing him talking about how you had to hustle, 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 hustle. And most of his fans were young people. And he was saying this repeatedly. Like I remember him saying, this was about 10 years ago, that he tweets from the toilet at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that's how that's how much you have to be on social media to build a following. And I started thinking to myself, like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because he owns a wine business at the time. But what if you're making the wine? What if you own the vineyard? You know what I mean? Should you be tweeting at 3 a.m. from the toilet, or should you be thinking about wine or sleeping for that matter? So also my approach to writing was very systematic. I used processes and blueprints. So I wrote an article, and this was my mischievous background. I didn't know much about, I wasn't yet a student, a well-read person in the way I became, as young me put it. I was just figuring things out. And I wrote an article called Why Gary Vaynerchuk is Flat Out Wrong. And I was scared to death. My hand was like hovering over the mouse. Like I didn't, because this guy was a nobody and he's Gary Vaynerchuk. And so I posted this article and I basically said, Gary Vaynerchuk's great, but he's giving this advice to young people. And if you really want to be successful, don't follow his advice, follow what he does, but it's better to have a systematic approach. So I called out this point of view. That night, he created a video talking about me by name. And he basically started out nice, but by the end, he was sweating and ranting and raving and going crazy. And all of his Vayniac fans started blowing up my phone and calling me lazy and stupid. And I didn't feel very lazy because I was working like a dog and making like no money. But then something really, and I was scared, and I was like, I ruined my career. But then something really funny happened. I started getting all these Twitter followers. Like I had no Twitter followers. And in like 20 minutes, I had 50 followers. And I started thinking, this is really interesting. There were probably all of these people out there who felt similar to how I did, but they didn't have anyone to organize their ideas. They didn't have a leader. And that launched my career. I mean, that directly led to me owning an agency and the whole thing. So why am I telling you this story? Am I telling you to go out and troll people? I am not. But what I will tell you is that a lot of you are probably out there right now, especially if your business took a hit in this pandemic, trying to do what you always did and just sort of pitch your ideas. You might be really good at sales. You might do a lot of networking. Who here has kind of like the meeting for coffee, making favors and introductions thing as part of their sales process? Okay, so a few of you, and who here has had a harder time doing that since? Okay, so there are a lot of methods that are harder now, but here's the thing. Does anyone remember the old movie Independence Day? Yeah, so someone type in the chat if you can remember, what was the only thing that could bring the many nations of the planet Earth together? If you don't do it in like 3 seconds, I'll just tell you. I'll give away the answer. Aliens. All right, Royce Johnson, aliens. The only thing that could create world peace is having another enemy that's not human beings. COVID is a good response, but that's if you had a time machine. But aliens is the answer. So here's the thing: whether you like it or not, and there is a lot. I mean, I show the research in the book, the reasons why we are all very tribal. We define ourselves against other things. It's important to you, especially for you, especially in this time, to use that to develop a point of view, because otherwise you can talk about your stuff all day long because we have to do everything online right now. But it's not the same to kind of tell people how great your business is when you're online, where you have to sort of reach out to more people in a less kind of face-to-face way than when you're doing it over coffee, or when you're doing it just networking, or more traditional methods, or even advertising. So how do you do that? How do you do that without becoming a Twitter troll, right? What you want to do, or one tactic, I don't know if you want to do this, but this is something that's been very useful to me and my clients that you can take away really quickly, is ask yourself two questions and really spend some time on this. Get someone to ask it to you if you need it. The first question is, what point of view in your industry is almost accepted as gospel, that is just so popular, that you truly hate, that really irritates you, that you think is just so wrong? So using the Gary Vee example, I would always hear this hustle, hustle, hustle thing, and it bothered me every single time. It just didn't make sense, and everyone just accepted it. So what I did was I said, well, I don't like that. Let me come up with an alternate point of view. The other question you should ask yourself that's related is, is what's something, a point of view in your industry that you're 100% confident is accurate, not 98% confident. So like if you believe, I don't know, the guys from Rework, the James Freed. Does anyone know Basecamp, that project management tool? So those guys picked a really great fight. You know, at the time, project management tools, software, were considered, you know, the more features you had, the better, bar none. That was the point of view. You wanted more functionality, more, because you could do more functions with that. So what these guys did was say, you know, that's not true. And in fact, there's too much complexity in work, in the workplace. People should not always be working in person. There should be a 4-day work week. There should be simplicity. That we focus too much on email. And they became these kind of gurus of simplicity and being stripped down in business. They became the leaders because no one was saying that. Other people felt it. So if you can come up with a polarizing point of view and do it respectfully, you will be really surprised, and just wrap everything in that. Don't just sprinkle it in here and there. Once you've tested it, go full bore. Make that your identity. Like right now, I'm the hype guy, right? I have a lot of other sides to my personality, but I hit that hard wherever I go. You will just be amazed, even in a virtual environment, when you start posting that stuff regularly on social media, telling people about it through email, whatever your mechanisms are, saying it, you know, in places like this, people will become attracted to you in a whole new way. So that's one of the strategies. So another strategy that is particularly well suited to adapt in tough times is something I call creating a secret society. So in the 1920s, there was a guy named Edward Bernays who was actually the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And he decided to use psychology to make a lot of money instead of, you know, treat people's mental illness or what have you. And he's actually known as the father of public relations. He actually invented that word. So a little piece of trivia is his original word for public relations was propaganda. He even has a book called that. And after World War I, that word became tainted. So he changed it to public relations. So any of you PR people out there, you know what you really do. So so Edward Bernays did a lot of things. He is responsible for a South American government being overthrown for the United Fruit Company. He's pretty much single-handedly responsible for making it acceptable for women to smoke, which he did on behalf of Lucky Strike cigarettes. And he is responsible for Americans eating bacon for breakfast. So didn't Americans always eat bacon for breakfast, right? I mean that's the American breakfast. I was in China doing a talk, and I had a translator, and I was like, okay, I told this story, and I said to like a room of 300 people, what is the quintessential American breakfast? They said eggs and bacon. I said, okay. But before the 20s, apparently Americans did not eat big, heavy meals like that. I mean, farmers did, I guess, but most people just had kind of a light meal. And Edward Bernays had Beech Nut as a client, which at the time was one of the major pork producers in the country. And so he needed to get bacon conception production up. So he could have done an advertising campaign, which is the equivalent of now trying to get 1 million Twitter followers one by one. You put enough ads telling how great your stuff is, and you hope that people follow. But he didn't do that. He didn't have enough time. He wanted to move faster than that. So he had spent a lot of time building relationships with people underneath the surface, not 1 million people, but a handful, a secret kind of society that he was just connected to the movers and shakers of his time. And he called up this doctor who basically was this expert who was connected to 5,000 other physicians, and had the guy write a letter. And this is not because I want you to lie. He lied, but that's not the moral here. But he wrote a letter telling about a study that said that bacon was the perfect breakfast food because it health wise, because it replaced the energy that you lose during sleep. Okay. So before long, every doctor in America was recommending bacon for breakfast as a health food, and that's why we eat bacon. So what is the moral here? Is that just a funny story? It is, but I think the moral for being in the time that we're in is that a lot of people really think, especially marketing, and not especially, including marketing pros, that you need to really build both your following and your customer base person by person, and you need to go out there and just throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall and have a lot of contacts and hope that, you know, um, certain people convert. And that can work okay in normal times. But those are based on a lot of very not even weak ties, on no ties. I mean, a lot of times it's the first time these people are seeing you or they see your message, but there's no connection usually between you. And when there's a recession or when there's something like that, it becomes a challenging dynamic because people start making decisions about money that they didn't make before, right? They say, well, yeah, I understand. It would be really nice to have a freelance marketer helping me come up with my visual brand, but I don't know. My revenues this year were half what they were the year before. That's going to have to be the thing I cut, right? Because it's just like a nice to have. It'd be great. You don't think of it as a nice to have, but they might, right? Or whatever the equivalent is. However, if you spend time instead, and most of you have already done this to an extent, building connections with a handful, very, very strong connections, even friendships, with a handful of strategic people who, when they say to do something, it's like life or death for the people that they're thinking about, you can move much more quickly. And the trick is to do this while still making it seem grassroots, right? Tucker Max is this guy who wrote these books in the 90s, like this book, I hope they serve beer in hell, which was extremely sexist. It was basically about him going around and like hooking up with women at bars and drinking a lot, but it made millions of dollars and whatever. And at a certain point, he decided to get married and have a kid, and that didn't really work anymore. And he wanted a different brand and a different life. So he started this business called Book in a Box, which is basically like this scalable ghostwriting service. However, it was so there was no way he wanted to make this happen in a matter of months, not in the 10 years it would have taken to build this one by one, because he had the baggage of this other brand that was of this drunken frat boy. So what did he do? He called his buddies. He had friends, James Altucher, Ryan Holiday, Tim Ferriss. These guys all came up together and they're all friends. Anyone know any of those names? Yeah, some of you. So they're all superstars. So basically, within a period of like 3 months, they all had him on his podcast talking about how this was the future of content generation, and he did $1 million in revenue in a month without leaving his bedroom. So how are some of the ways to do this if you don't already have these connections? Well, I'm someone who knew nobody when I started the business, and I cracked a way to make these things happen, playing on some human instincts. So the first thing is, instead of using social media to solely build a lot of followers, start using it to connect with people on a human level. So, for example, you might have some specific interests. I mean, list them. Are you into certain types of musical artists? Do you have a deep passion for a certain sports team? Are you really into Dungeons and Dragons? I mean, I don't know. Whatever it is, write it down. And then add a bunch of people to, I'm going to say Twitter, but whatever it is, it could be Instagram, whatever. And instead of just hammering these people, let's have a business conversation. I love your work. Aren't you fantastic? And talking about business all the time, monitor for a while, observe, be a fly on the wall. Because every once in a while, someone will drop a hint about themselves as a human being. It almost always happens. Like there's this guy, Brian Clark, who runs Rainmaker and Copy Blogger, really powerful, big marketing companies at this point. And he's all business. He usually posts only about the legitimate stuff. But I noticed something. He had Henry Rollins speak at one of his conferences, which was weird to me because Henry Rollins was the singer of Black Flag, this hardcore band, and that was odd. And then once in a while, he'd wear like a band T-shirt and of a kind. And I like that kind of music. I like punk music. And I remember being a teenager, we would see someone on the boardwalk. If they had a punk rock shirt, you would point at them and you'd sort of nod and they'd nod. We called it like the punk rock bond, it was like this like, because we're all tribal, right? So I tweeted something to him about the band and he was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. So people hit this guy up all day for business stuff and he has to ignore them or he'd be overloaded. But I talked to him about something as a human being that we both have an interest in, and we are now colleagues. We both, not colleagues, I wouldn't say we're friends, but we have a relationship. So that's one thing. Another really good thing to do is create a piece of digital media, not with the idea of building a following for that media, although that would be nice, but as positive bait to attract the kind of people you want to know. So everybody wants exposure. Everybody likes their ego stroked. So something that I do, only if I truly believe it, is I'll look at people I really want to meet. And let's say you start a podcast, because that's easy to do, relatively easy. But it could be a blog. If you write for Forbes or Inc., or which I know most people don't, or any publication, you can use that, any kind of media, and write to someone and say, hey, I'm doing a mini series within my podcast on the top 25 best blank. You're on my short list. Can we have a conversation? And then get them on the phone, and they will. It is funny. I got the director of photography of Pixar and TED speaker, not TEDx, TED, Danielle Feinberg, to respond in 20 minutes to this template. And she said, wow, it's so unusual for me to be recognized in front of the scene. I'm always behind the scenes. Thank you for this. And the podcast had about 4 listeners. It didn't even exist yet. It's amazing how powerful it is when you come in as a buyer instead of a seller, right? And then the question is, and it also gives you a chance to have a deep conversation with someone. The question then becomes, what do you do once you have the relationship to actually turn that into opportunities? At that point, it's marketing 101. I mean, not marketing, networking 101. At that point, it's doing the favors, doing the introductions. I even have a grid. I try to do 2 favors or introductions plus a week. So what's the difference of that and the normal sort of BNI marketing advice? The difference is networking advice. The difference is a lot of times we network with people just like us. We go to a networking group, even AMA, which is a wonderful group. And I think everyone should always continue to do things like this. We're dealing with our peers for the most part, which is valuable, which is important. At the same time, the people a couple notches above you in net worth, in prestige, in whatever it is, they're human beings too. And they like to be recognized for their interests. They like their egos stroked. And once you get that first connection going, and you find out what's something that's cheap for you to give. I don't mean financially cheap, but easy or whatever, and is valuable to them. That's extremely, you can form that relationship, and before long reciprocity kicks in, and they'll just start, you'll be able to ask for favors, you'll be able to tell them what you want. So I'm friends now with the CEO of Meetup, and I don't say these things to drop names. I say it because I didn't know any of these people. I met him through this process, and I realized that he also, in addition to being a CEO, had book ideas and things like that, and was trying to get his message out. So anytime I would find a podcaster, because I know a lot of podcasters, I would recommend him as a guest, which was actually easy for me to do and useful for me because my friends need guests. And even though this guy is a massively successful C-suite guy, he was so thankful for that he's recommended tons of business to me since. So that's that, you build that secret society. And then, because I know we only have 7 minutes left until question and answer, I'm going to give you one more tactic, and I call it fetishizing work. And that sounds a little bit saucy, but it's not. So what that basically means, I'm going to come back to the Gary Vaynerchuk story. I talked about how Gary Vaynerchuk tells all of these people to work like a dog, and how I took a stand against that. But what I didn't really explore with you is why he would do that. Why does this guy, who is so busy, spend hours and hours every week telling young people that they need to work harder and berating them for it? He just, for someone that busy and for someone who's such a good business person, for him to spend that much time telling aspiring entrepreneurs to work harder, there has to be a reason, right? Well, there is. Cults do this all the time. If you look at the Moonies, the Unification Church, their cult members work on average 65 hours a week for free, recruiting on their behalf. This is a very common thing. There used to be a cult run by this guy Gurdjieff in many years ago that a lot of Hollywood celebrities were attracted to. And some people still like him. They don't consider him a cult guy, so that's debatable. However, if you went to his compound at any point, there would be rows of Hollywood stars digging holes to nowhere, just digging ditches, So why did, and it was, work for salvation and blah, blah, blah. But why are they really doing this? Well, if you get someone to work hard on behalf of a cause that's your cause, and then they decide later, you know what, I don't know about this. This may not be great. Cognitive dissonance kicks in. Because if you're working hard on behalf of something and then it has to be good, otherwise you wasted all your time. Your brain can't make sense of that. So getting people to work hard on your behalf bonds people to you. It's the secret of multi-level marketing. It also gets people to work hard on your behalf. It creates this army of evangelists. So you're basically, it's like Tom Sawyer with the white fence, if you remember that story. Convince everyone that doing work for you is the secret to their success. So how can you do this, in this current environment in an ethical way? Well, I don't know completely what the makeup of this group is. However, what I do know is that many of us are in the consultancy business in one form or another. This is the American Marketing Association. There are a lot of professional marketers. There are also a lot of members of large companies here, but a lot of us do for our clients. Our clients tell us we need this and this done, and we work like dogs doing it for them. And then the smallest mistake that we make, we could hit 5 metrics, and they say, well, what about metric number 6? Why didn't you hit that quickly enough? Has anyone had that experience? You just feel like you're working so hard on behalf of your clients, and they become more and more demanding the more successes you get. All right, not a lot of people. Okay. I would actually be curious to hear from someone that isn't the case. Why they haven't heard that? Because I see that dynamic a lot in audiences I talk to. Okay, so I got a yes, getting a couple yeses. All right. Well, in any case, we often talk about the dilemma of time for money, how it's hard to trade time for money. And especially in an environment like this, It's very challenging because if you have a model where you have 8 to 10 clients at any given time, or 8 to 10 contracts, or whatever it is, even 20 contracts, big ticket contracts, when you have to trade more time for more dollars, you can't go out and sell anymore. People start pulling out, and you don't, it's a tough dilemma. And you also don't create those effects that I'm talking about. There's this group called Strategic Coach that was one of the first business coaching programs, and they charge between $10,000 and $25,000 a year. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of clients. And with the exception of some group calls, you basically go there 4 times a year for, you know, basically 4 times a year. And there's like, just do the math. So it's like an 8-hour day, 4 times a year. And so when I was part of it, and I can't speak of it highly enough, it really helped me. But basically, you go into a room, there are printed forms, there are all these tools that are great tools. You customize them together. They give you a game plan that you co-create, and then you go out into the world for a quarter and you implement the plans. And for me, this was a lot of money because I did it years ago. So I did everything they asked me to do. But a lot of people got busy and they would come back into the room and the coach would say, "So what did you do?" And they would say, "Oh gosh, Mary, I'm so sorry. I started off really good, but as time went on, I couldn't really implement it, but I worked really hard." And Mary would say, "Oh, it's okay. Progress, not perfection." So I thought that was so interesting. I was busting my hump as an agency person, working like a dog for my clients and having to do more and more and more work. And these people had people in a room for 4 days, and people were making excuses about why they didn't work harder. And that's because they were giving people the fishing pole instead of the fish. But at the same time, they created a structure that wasn't doing for, it was co-creating, and it was allowing people to go out into the world and create scale and implement the project. So what does this mean? If you're in any kind of do for business and you're finding that really challenging, combined with the make war not love, combined with the secret society, come up with an offering which you're giving people the tools, you're giving people the mindset, and then and they have to go out and implement it by themselves. And the message should be, the harder you work at this, the better you will do. It's like Weight Watchers. They don't suck the fat out of you, right? I mean, it's not liposuction. It's you guys have to work the program, work the program, work the program, work the program, right? So if you can create some sort of structured process where you can get lots of people investing money to implement tools that you've created, and the work depends on them, that is a really good way to get out of the corner that some of us are in, as a result of this crisis. And it's a good template in general for surviving in tough times. So yeah, I mean, it is exactly 12:40. I already see a question coming in. I'll hand the mic back to Young Mi, and we can do a little Q&A.
So thank you, Michael. Really getting our curiosity up. And so I'm going to read out the first question, but other people who would like to ask questions, I invite you to turn on your video and mic and speak your question directly to Michael. But the first question is from Nina Parikh, who's asking, what are the most effective essential tools for hype? Podcasts, blogs, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, writing a book, etc. As you said, there are so many tools that are not a core part of your business that it's hard to know where to put your time and effort. So if you had one go-to tool, or maybe two, what would they be, Michael?
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're tools. And I don't want to discourage you, but I think there's a different way to think about it. I get questions like this a lot, right? People say, should I use Snapchat, podcasts, blog, Instagram, etc.? It's like saying, should I use hammers, nails, power saws, drills, to build my house? Those things are all important to use, or what brand of power saw should I use, right? Those are just tools. You need to start differently. You need to think to yourself, what am I trying to accomplish? So if I look a year from now and I had the best year that I could possibly expect to have with everything that's going on. What does that year look like? Okay. And then think about what hype strategies can I use? So, for example, the Emperor Augustus in ancient Rome, where they most certainly didn't have podcasts, commissioned an epic poem to legitimize his rule, right? And that was another one of the hype tactics, which we don't have time to go into. So, I think the way to think about it instead is this: figure out what is your contrarian point of view, and then figure out how can you first of all, what tools are you best at using? I like writing because I'm a writer, so I'm always writing, right? But if you don't like writing, you shouldn't use writing. I will give you one tip though that's tool specific. A lot of people say that they need a book. I hear that all the time. I need a book. I need a book. If only I had a book, I could get more speaking gigs. A book, a book, a book. And it's great. It's important to have a book. But not every book is created equal. There are a lot of books out there that are just books, leadership strategies for the 21st century. I mean, just these kind of very generic books. And those books can help. It's better than nothing. The ones who really do well, though, with the book, they create a Bible. So what do I mean by that? If you can create a book, because books still do have credibility, but if you can create a book that sort of promises to give you the all-encompassing solution to some corner of the universe, especially if you have a good idea, that works really well. And I call that a Bible. So How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book is basically anything you need to know to become an influential person. Read this book. Influence by Robert Cialdini. The 7 Habits of highly effective people. If you want to be a highly effective person, this is the Rosetta Stone for every habit you'll ever have to know. But then you see these other books, I don't know, quadrants for strategic success or whatever they are, and people wonder why it doesn't work. It's really about creating and delivering on a Bible.
Okay, other questions?
Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, so Nima, does that answer your question? So maybe Nima is typing, but while she's typing,
okay,
yes,
great.
Thank you. So other questions?
I'll ask a question.
Great, Karen.
Hi, Michael. I'm Karen Cummins.
How are you?
This has been an excellent presentation, by the way. Really.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to play the skeptic for a second.
Sure.
So I feel like, because what you're talking about, especially the idea around creating a point of view, you have to have a point of view. You can't just sort of sell your skill set anymore. I feel like everybody has a blog, right? Or everybody is in the business of content creation now, right? I mean, it just feels like, everybody's an aspiring writer, blogger, vlogger, whatever, YouTuber. Feels so flooded. And I hear some of the strategies you're talking about to help build yourself. But just what's your thoughts around this sort of flood of content creation that we're all living in? And how do you succeed in that environment?
I think it's a great question. I think you're right, 100% right. I also think that it's hard not to get swept up in the trends. I mean, I think that having a digital course is great. I also think that I haven't talked to anyone in the last 3 weeks who isn't creating a digital course. But again, they're all tools, right? I mean, just because most books are going to get lost, just because most scrolls used to get lost, doesn't mean that you shouldn't use a scroll, right? So, however, the internet is really tough because it's kind of like throwing a cork in the Pacific Ocean. It's as close to infinite as we could possibly get. So if you just put up a blog and talk about it a little bit and hope that people find it, unless you're lucky, you're going to fail, right? I mean, it's just not going to work well. So I think it's a function of getting a little more creative and, dare I say, hype oriented with the tools, right? So here's an example. So it's not a accident that my agency is called Microfame Media, because I'm a big believer, and this has been successful for me, and clients. You got to start with finding a niche. And I don't mean that in the traditional marketing sense. I mean, there is a corner of the internet that's like I'm going to use an old term, an old boys network, where everyone knows everyone, right? So I remember the reason I came up with this is because I used to be in a really brass tacks industry. It was the BPO industry, which is eventually operating contact centers. And although I hated it, I did well there and I was in it. And what you would realize is this is a multi-billion-dollar industry that most people don't know about. And everyone knows everyone. So, like the vice president of call center services of Sirius XM used to work at an outsourcer. Like they all go back and forth. So the clients are the vendors, and the vendors are the clients. So there's a real opportunity in there for someone to create a piece of content with a point of view, a blog, a podcast, a whatever, that gets visibility, if you don't just call it the call center blog, right? Because who's going to look at that? But if it has a really strong point of view, I mean, I don't know. People don't matter, because the thing in the BPO industry, everyone is like, we're all people focused, and then you get on the line and see how they run their business. It's about churn and burn, get people off the phone as quick as possible. So if someone would come out and just admit people don't matter, that might do really well. Or Zappos is a great example. Zappos was the biggest threat to the call center industry. It wasn't even a call center company, because they proved a model where good service could be delivered on the phone. And every call center outsourcer was saying that couldn't be done. And as a result, his content blew up. No one knew. I mean, all right, rest in peace. Tony Hsieh, he just passed away. But no one knew who that guy was before that. But he had a very, very specific point of view. So I think, to me, that's the way you cut through.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a question from Helen Burgess, all the way in London. She wants to know, what is the worst example of hype you've ever seen? And I wanted to ask a related question about our president.
Yeah.
What are some of his favorite hype strategies? So if you could handle
All of
both
them.
questions.
Well, the first, so hi, Helen. I lived in London for 6 months when I was 20, and it's one of my favorite cities. So say hi for me. I guess I would like some clarification. What do you mean by worst? Do you mean like most damaging to the world, or like ineffective? I guess I don't know what you mean by worst.
Hi. Yeah, no, I suppose I mean ones that could actually be really damaging for a company or an individual.
So I think
Where
that
people completely got it wrong.
No. I think that every strategy can be used for great good and used for great evil. I mean, the most damaging hype artist, it's all about what they hype. I mean, Hitler and Goebbels were fantastic. Charles Manson was fantastic. But to give you an example of how the same strategies, I was very conscious in writing this book, and just in my thinking in general, to think about what strategies were completely devoid of moral content. And I don't mean negative, that they could be used for good or evil, that they're just about mass psychology. So to give you an example, there's this concept that has been talked about before, but that I talk about in the book. It's sort of a subset of a strategy called milk before meat, where you get other people to think that an idea is theirs through questioning. You slowly get them to believe an idea is theirs, right? And the person to most famously talk about this was Dale Carnegie, who I mentioned before, in How to Win Friends and Influence People. So Warren Buffett uses this all the time, and I think most people think that he's a relative force for good. I mean, in business, he's very well respected. He built a great company. And he has on his wall a framed certificate of the Dale Carnegie Institute, and not his college degree, because he feels that was the most important thing he ever learned. It gave him an understanding of market psychology, and it also lets him get people to do what he wants, which he needs to do. The other great student of this tactic is Charles Manson, who he was a pimp and a low-level car thief, and he was in prison. And he saw that they were offering a course on Dale Carnegie, and he took it, and he became the star student of the Dale Carnegie Institute. So when he went out into the world and became Charles Manson, capital C, capital M, he gathered these hippie kids around them, and he would say to them, I think things are getting really tough in America, man, the establishment. What do you think we should do about it? And he knew exactly what he wanted them to do, and he would massage them into it. And he got these got a prom queen to commit murder, mass murder. So it's really, human beings react the way human beings react. You know, we have evolved not to see the world accurately. We have evolved to see the world in a way that helps us survive and spread our genes. We may not like that, but it's true. It is just true. I mean, I can give you a lot of evidence on that. So it's a function of, if you accept that, which you should because it's true, are you going to use it for good or evil, right? So that's sort of the reality of the situation. And now I can go on to the Trump question if you'd like. It's funny. I'm going to try not to talk about my political beliefs here, but I'm going to try to tell you about Trump. So Trump helped me come up with the idea for this book in a weird way. I was on a business trip and I had always been interested in this stuff. And I had this old, strange book with me called The Crowd by this guy named Gustave Le Bon from 1895. This really old, it was considered the first book of crowd psychology. I have it right here, actually, because I look at it a lot. If you can get past some of the racist rhetoric, which all of those old books had, it's very useful. But, you know, this guy had seen the Paris Commune burning Paris to the ground for no real reason. They had already clearly lost and kept destroying things. And he just didn't get it. He didn't get why crowds acted so irrationally. So he dedicated the rest of his life to figuring out how crowds worked. And it's still respected, you know, what he came up with. And it was one of the earliest Trump debates in the primary when people thought he was a total clown. I mean, you might think that still, but people thought he had no chance of winning. And I remember I was laying on my bedspread, sort of flipping through this book and watching the debate. And I'm telling you, like an hour in, I was like, this guy's going to win. I mean, they had things in this book like, use vague, future-focused slogans that don't have a real meaning that people can put their own meaning into. Prestige is very appealing to crowds. When there's no prestige, money is an excellent substitute. And all my friends were like, this guy, you know, isn't going to win. I was like, I think he might win. And he won. So I don't know what else he's good at. That's very, very debatable. But he's a fantastic hype artist. He does it all. I mean, he's great.
Yeah, it's quite amazing to watch. Thank you. And Gabrielle Hueso is asking, do you think it's possible to create hype for a product that you as a consultant don't understand or have zero excitement about? And I'm sure you've been there, done that, Michael, right?
Do I think it's possible? Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, I think in a perfect world, you probably want to work with, you know, products you're excited about. I will put a caveat on. So here's the thing. There's two ways to answer this question. There's another one of the I'm trying to put my words together. One of the reasons I decided to kind of evangelize this idea in the world is that I saw so many people selling hot air and doing it so successfully that it occurred to me, what if more people selling good stuff used the same tactics? So there's this guy named Tai Lopez, and I'll just be very direct about my beliefs about him. He is an awesome marketer. He has this famous commercial, Here in My Garage, where he, like, speaking about prestige and money and credibility signifiers. That's another one. He has this thing where he shows his Lamborghini in his garage, and then he says, but you know what my really thing I'm proud of is? And he swivels the camera over my bookshelf, you know? And he has all these books, and he says, you know, he reads a book a day, which I know is nonsense, but he said so that's a credibility signifier. It makes him this kind of like magician, which is another hype strategy. He does all of these hype things, but I know people who have worked there. I know people who have read his stuff. He charges. He has this thing called the 67 steps. It's nothing. It's not. I mean, if he basically says read lots of books and work hard, you know, it's just hot air, right? So yeah, this stuff can be used for most things. However, Ryan Holiday says the best way to market a book, because he markets books, is to have a good book. If you have something that's actually a good product and that has the hype baked into it, your job will be infinitely easier. So, I mean, the best thing you can do for yourself as a consultant, I'm not saying you can't do it with other projects, but if you can align yourself with really great stuff, you'll do better.
So, Michael, JJ is asking for the name of the book again. And also, there
I'll
must
put
be
it
a
in
way
the
to
chat.
pre-order, right? Tell us how to pre-order your book.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it's the Hype Handbook. I'll put it in the chat. Amazon is the best place, you know? I mean, just type the Hype Handbook in and you can pre-order it.
Great,
That'd be the best bet.
great.
Um,
So Nima is following up with Trump and asking, wasn't that already his persona that he just brought to politics? And we have time for one more question after this. So if you put it in the chat or just turn on your mic.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point of view. I think that's true. At the same time, how did he get that persona, right? I mean, how many game show hosts have become president, you know, or do we have President Pat Sajak? I mean, really, this guy's most successful thing ever was running essentially a game show. I mean, he came from a family. It's really interesting to read Mary Trump's book, you know, on the Trump family, because Trump basically traded up the chain using pure hype at every turn, right? I mean, he presented himself as, so another hype strategy is what I call become a magus. It's where you present yourself as a larger than life character, right? And Richard Branson does this well, although Richard Branson is a great business person. But Richard Branson is happily married, so why is he going around jet skiing with a naked model like hanging off his thing? Because he creates the life that a certain cohort wants, right? So, but Trump, you know, if you read that book, he didn't take a $1 million loan. His father ran the business until the day he died. He was the front man, you know, which is fine. I mean, it's okay to have a family business, but he created himself as this wonderful deal maker. He created a Bible, The Art of the Deal. That wasn't a book, that was a Bible. If you want to learn how to make deals, here's The Art of the Deal. You know, he slapped his name. Repetition is another one. Trump, 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 Trump. We've been seeing that for decades. You know, he created a show where he got to frame reality perfectly. So yeah, sure. I mean, this stuff isn't easy to do, and it's pretty tough to become president of the United States. But if you look at his fame and perception compared to the cold, hard realities of his track record, it's pretty incredible that he was able to do that.
Great. All right. So we are almost at the hour. So in closing, Michael, not only do I want to thank you a lot, but I'm sure a lot of people will want to stay in touch with you.
Sure.
And I don't know, please let us know how to stay in touch with you. And I don't know whether you want to share your reading list. I mean, I think you got a flavor that not only is Michael extremely well read, but his reading list is a little bit unusual. So it's very interesting. So are you able to share a little bit more about
Yeah,
that as well? So.
I will. I'll put in the chat both. I have a book club, Liberty. Thank you. Thank you for your great minds think alike. So I have a thing called the Hype Book Club. So I'm gonna put two things in the chat. I'm gonna put my email address, and anyone can email me at any time. I love, you know, keeping in touch with everybody. But I have a thing called the Hype Book Club. So basically something I noticed is that I was reading all of these really weird and interesting books that were more helpful to me than any of the marketing books out there, like strange biographies, this and that, crowd psychology books, and a lot of them are also fun to read because they're really out there, you know. And so people started asking about them, and I knew Ryan Holiday, who I've mentioned a few times, has a book club, but he just recommends any books, and they're great. I love his book club. But I thought that it might be neat to make recommendations about these kinds of books. So it started as just like a book list, and then over time people started kind of going back and forth with me. So it's sort of like my little tribe. I talk with everyone on that list a lot. Once in a while we do, you know, little seminars and things. So yeah, I'll put that in here right now, and I'll put my email. So the Hype Book list is hypereads.com/list. And sorry, it doesn't hyperlink. You guys can cut and paste it in. And then just my email address.
I think that's a typo. It says hi.
Oh, it is a typo. Thank you. I thanks for doing that, because anyone would have, yeah, reads.com. Thank you for that. I did it again. What am I doing today?
Maybe it's autocorrect.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Yeah.
And then, oh, thank you, Phyllis. That was so nice. And thank you, everybody. This has been a great group.
Mhm. So thank you so much, Michael. I always love hearing you
Yeah, me
talk. And thank you to everybody in our audience. Once again, if you're not a member of the AMA New York, join today.
Thanks, Karen.
And if you are a member, please volunteer. We have lots of interesting projects. I just spoke with somebody all the way in Singapore earlier today about creating a marketing plan for an up and coming nonprofit that supports getting mid-management women into top management positions. So we have lots of projects like that, as well as other interesting projects coming down the pike, and we could use your brilliance. So thank you again, Michael. Thank you for everybody joining us. And please enjoy the rest of your day. Don't forget to join us for our cocktails in the green room, and hope to see you then, as well as again in January. Bye-bye.